Here we go. All right. So all you have to do is watch. Okay, we'll get started. We have a little delay. The connector that people, bring in a laptop and connect it, it's broken in here. So I'll take care of that after this morning. My name is Cynthia Garrity, and some of you know me already. I'm with the Learning Commons upstairs. And what we do is help students when they need to use technology in their classroom for an assignment, or for you guys more specifically, if you are going to go out and have a teaching experience in a classroom and you would like to use technology, we'll help you feel more secure about that and give you some advice and maybe even provide you with, help you get equipment so you can go out and do that. What I'm going to talk about today is, I guess I should give you a little preface of what my background is. I taught preschool for my Bachelor of Science degrees in Child Development, and I taught preschool for 16 years with the Head Start and State at-Risk programs before going back to get my master's and my PhD in Curriculum and Instructional Technology. So I've had a lot of experience with both teaching kids, young kids, and teaching college students, and using technology to enhance both of those. So I'm going to talk with you just a little bit about things that are available with the iPad that you can use with young children. Now I want to preface this. I agree with many of the skeptics that say a young child should not be in front of the screen all the time. I think the way that young kids make connections is by actually interacting with their environment. And so what I tend to do, even with books, is I'll start there and then use things in the books to teach other concepts. And I do the same thing with an iPad. If the kids are going to be exploring a piece of literature on the iPad, I try to then expand that throughout my entire classroom in different learning centers so that the kids use the concepts from the book to learn the other things that we were already going to teach, whether that's an art assignment, whether that goes into music, whether it goes into a little bit of research. My own class read, let's see, which book was it? I don't even think they got this from a book. A little boy brought in a nest one day to school, which is, I taught in very rural Iowa, so much like rural Kansas. And one little guy brought in a nest, and the kids were fascinated. And so we talked about what the nest was for. And well, then we had a hibiscus tree, one of those fake ones, in our dramatic play area. And the kids, I looked over a few days in a row, and they're trying to put an egg up there, and the egg keeps falling out of the tree. And they were getting kind of frustrated. So I went over and I said, your egg keeps falling out of the tree. I know, Captain Obvious, but I said, your egg keeps falling out of the tree. And they said, we need a nest. And being the kind of teacher I am, I never give them a straight answer. And I said, well, how in the world are we going to get a nest? And of course, their first thought was go out in a tree and take one. And I explained that wasn't going to work because the birds kind of needed those. Then they said, well, we'll make a nest. So we actually split into two groups. My associate went with them to the library, and they looked up books on birds, and they talked to the librarian, and she talked about how nests are made and the different birds have different nests. And then my group, I was the only computer, this was in 88, 89, the only computer in my school that had internet access. And the kids were used to the fact that we would look up things on the computer. A little boy goes fishing with his dad. We look up what kind of fish he caught so he could show everyone. Or a kid's dad went hunting for wood ducks, and the other kids didn't know what a wood duck was. So we went and we printed out pictures of wood ducks they could trace or color or cut out or whatever they wanted to do. And the kids were always part of that. So we looked up how to make nests. And we never made a nest that whole year. We kept trying. We never made one that would stick in the tree. We decided birds were better nest builders than we were. So it wasn't a failure. It was just something that we couldn't replicate. The kids also would go on there, and I came back from Hawaii, and I brought a bunch of shells. And you know how the only starfish you usually see in the Midwest are the dried ones? And they saw that, and they're looking at it, and they're like, where's him's eyes? I had no idea. So we started looking up starfish, and we looked online because we wanted to find videos. These kids would never have seen a starfish swimming. These were low-income kids from the Midwest, and they learned so much about starfish that year. They learned that they're different colors. We found a purple one that was gorgeous, that they swim around, that they can, squeeze themselves into things. But you know what the neatest thing they learned? Is where the starfish lay their eggs. Does anyone know how they lay their eggs? Now, if you're a 4-year-old boy, this is like one of the coolest fun facts you can learn. They lay them out their armpits. So those little boys right now are grown, some of them married, and I'm sure every one of them can tell you how the starfish lays eggs. So I'm going to go through a few things children's literature-wise that are on the iPad. And I want to talk first about what an iPad is not. An iPad is not a storage device. You guys have probably figured this out. Does anybody have an iPad or a tablet? You don't share, you don't save things on here like you do a flash drive. Doesn't work. And a lot of times when people first get an iPad, they think they can. Everything on here is stored inside of an application of some sort. So your pictures are in the photo app. Yes, they take up space on here, but you can't just go get them. Sometimes you can trick an iPad and get pictures and movies off of it, but it's gotten harder and harder as they've gotten newer. It also doesn't allow real well for multiple users at the same time, because only one person can be touching it at a time. Otherwise, the whole screen doesn't work right. It also isn't good for heavy typing tasks. A lot of you have probably found out that it doesn't do real well for taking notes in class unless you're going to write them on one of the apps that allows that, or unless you have a keyboard. Otherwise, it's really difficult. So what can an iPad be? Well, the sky's the limit. And a lot of schools, a lot of young children that even don't have verbal skills. I talked to a gal in speech pathology yesterday. She's working with the Head Start classroom at Roosevelt, and we talked, and they're using a lot of apps that were developed specifically for kids with speech issues. And so these can be really great tools, and they're very engaging. So they can be a lot of things. But one thing we need to think about when we're using iPads is they're not just there to be used passively by kids. I'm going to show you some really cool apps that they can use, and some of them will be just books that they read through. That's only one small area. You can also invent, design, create, build, and then share with people by using the iPad. And let's see if this link will work for me. No, it doesn't want to. I'll send this link out to Dr. Meckenstock and she can share with you, but there's several apps that you can use for storytelling. One of my areas of research is digital storytelling. There's very simple apps that kids can use where they can go around and take pictures, bring them into this app, and record their voices, or now with the way that you can go into the keyboard and press record, they can record and it'll type what they say. Does it matter when you're very, very young that everything is spelled correctly? That's half the charm of it, is to have it spelled like they say it. You can go in and correct a little bit because sometimes, especially if you have a child that has a speech impediment or a speech issue or some other difficulty, you may not be able to tell what they're saying. Because you've been with that child. But you want it to come through on their book so their parents will know. Then you can post these on the website for parents. So how will you make the assignment talk back? That's how you should think. That's how I think about books. There's a book called, I don't know if any of you have read it, it's called When Pegaso Met Matisse. And it's about a pig and a moose, a pig and a cow, and they're artists. And the book parallels the real life friendship between Picasso and Matisse. What's really cool about that, if you're teaching, and I'm going to go a little bit older here to maybe upper elementary, you want to teach a little art history, you can give them a website with 5 or 6 different artists that you've done some research on. And then give them an assign to make a comic book, maybe using something like Comic Life or some of the online applications. Make a comic book, a few pages, comparing and contrasting a few different artists. I did this with a group of teacher educators, and we learned that a lot of people that grew up to be famous artists at that time period had a lengthy illness as a child. And that was their way to express themselves. And I thought that was super interesting. Another way is to use the iPad as a part of social play, a part of creating or building, and part of imagination. I used cameras when I taught, because it was back in the dark ages. But when your kids are out making these designs with their buildings, we often forget that if we go up and take a picture and then make a recording saying, this is what they're telling me about the building, you can print that and put that up as a poster with their words. They will go back to that and revisit it. They'll say, oh, I remember when we made this, and then one of the adults in the classroom can read what they said. Pretty soon they're going to think they can read it. And some of the older ones will be able to. But they can revisit that and they can say, I wonder if we added this. They go back then to the block area and they add more. They start to become little engineers. So I used to do a lot of documenting and a lot of posting it on the wall. Not only was it beneficial for the kids, but when my principal came in, other teachers, or the parents, they could see at a glance what their kids were doing in the classroom. And it gave their play the respect it deserved, because we talked about what they were learning while they did it, because we got it from their mouths. It wasn't just me as the teacher saying, oh, they're not just playing, this is their work. It was actually from their mouths telling their parents, this is what we were working on. This is an app that my grandchildren love, and this is a great storytelling app. I just added the link, so this should work just great. So let's make sure I've got sound here. Does someone want to turn a light down in the back? Somebody that's sitting back there.
There's a little switcher.
Up here?
Yeah.
Perfect. You can make the puppets bigger or little, or just by pulling your fingers apart. My 2-year-old grandson figured that out and showed it to me. Then it allows children to talk. Press a red button and talk, and it makes their puppets talk. It's awesome. Shoot, there's just one little bit. So is that passive? Are they just sitting there with that app listening to somebody else's story? No. And these characters are hilarious looking. They are sock puppets. So why not later have them make their own sock puppets? And make their sock puppets to fit characters of a well-known story that they really like. But I love this because you can bring in your own backgrounds if you pay the little bit more for the app. These apps are relatively cheap, and teachers don't have a lot of money. But you know what? You can get by with one iPad in a class. Much better if you have more than that. But if you only have one, you just put the timer up. Kids have time to go in and make their story. You can save these so they don't have to finish in that time. They can save their stories and then go back and work on them again. One of my issues is I don't like in an early childhood classroom to have actual, we only have free time from 10 until 11. I don't like that. It's necessary because in my early childhood programs, we served them breakfast and lunch. But we never cleaned up the art center, and a lot of times we left out the blocks. Because they're building things, they want to come back to them. How would you feel if you were making something, maybe working on a car, or you were creating something and somebody said, I'm sorry, you have to put it all away now and leave? No wonder we have issues when we try to transition kids from what they're doing. Let me go back and get my our PowerPoint. Okay, the next one I want to show you, and you might be familiar with this one. This one's called Chatterbox, but this is the kids version. Now this one took a picture of a little boy, or a picture that someone had drawn, and I'll show you what it did, what the app does.
Hi YouTube, this is the first intro video that we will have. And if you want to know where I make the talking face stuff, it's from an app called Chatterpix.
Chatterpix.
And I just want to let you know there will be lots of videos. So if you wake up in the morning and find a new video, don't be surprised. Bye!
Isn't that neat? And it was using their own drawings. You don't have to. You can get a drawing of their dog, and all you do is draw a line by where the mouth is, and then they record a sound, and it makes the picture talk. I love that one. I like apps where kids can get in and actually do some talking. All right, this is a very cool one, and honestly, I printed these yesterday and forgot to bring them down. They are, it's augmented reality. Have you heard about that? Okay, great. These are the ones with the planets. And they're flashcards, and the kids can take their computer and open the app on it, and it's got a big A. It's a big purple A, so it's easy for you as a teacher. Open the app that's the big purple A. Now you're going to have a few kids that are going to go, no, I want to open. You know, you can actually learn to lock these down to one app. How cool would that be for if you really wanted them to just use one app? So they go in, and all they have to do is move the camera over the top of these flashcards, and it pops out 3D at them. I'll show you what. Oh no! Okay, let's see. There we go. Here's the one with the animal alphabet. Probably won't be quite as cool as the one I had because kids were playing, but oh cool, it does show them. How it jumps out. Now how cool if you got flashcards and yet, yeah.
Is it only certain flashcards?
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's ones made by the company. However, this particular app, you can learn to make a picture on the wall that either somebody's drawn or whatever, and when they scan over it, it'll show them a movie. So you can do a lot of cool things. The app's called Aurasma, A-U-R-A-S-M-A. And I'm going to also send Dr. Meckenstock a list of the apps I showed you today, because I know it's hard to, I haven't even told you the name of some of them correctly. Chatterpix, Sock Puppets, and AR flashcards. The flashcards themselves are free. You get them in a PDF, you can print them out. So you can print them out over and over again. And I thought this would be a really cool, if you were gonna send like an iPad home with one kid a week or something, you could send home the flashcards too, maybe laminate them. You'd have to double check that it still works that way, but it works. Like if I bring up the flashcards on one computer and I put the iPad over it, it works there. So even if you sent the flashcards home and said, open these up. Now the kids are going through there and you think, oh, they're gonna get distracted by the animals. No, they're gonna start really learning those different letters because they see things popping up and they can interact with them. It's really exciting for them. All right. This one is an app called Good Night. I think it's Good Night Farm, this one. My grandkids and I play this one a lot. And what it does is it goes through, I think I'll turn it up on. It goes through the bedtime routine, but it's for animals on the farm. And my kids grew up on a farm, and any of you that grew up on a farm, when you were little, you really thought about that. You know, you took out hay and straw for their beds, and you know, my kids, when they were learning to do chores in the morning, they didn't get breakfast until their animals had. Plain and simple. And they learned that from an early age. So when they were ready to get dogs, I never had to worry about them not feeding the dogs. Because they took care, we had lizards and dogs and birds and goats and pigs and cattle, and now we have horses. So I'm going to show you just a little bit about this one. I used to try to show these on the iPad. Oh man. All right. That's easy enough to show because I have the actual, that's the other thing. I have students sometimes email me and they'll say, that link you posted on Blackboard doesn't work. And I'm like, Google. And here we go.
Night falls. The moon is high. All the people are ready to sleep as they turn off the lights. But wait, look at the farmhouse. There are still some lights on. The animals are sleepy too. Do you want to turn off the lights? Good night, dear dog.
And they have to figure out where to turn off the light. Sometimes it's a light switch. See the light? You have to click on that light. Oh no.
Good night, dear fishies.
I'm going to let you listen to the rest of it, but look at how that cow is made. Could you guys make something like that in the classroom? Could they make animals that have the legs like that? You could use those braids, you know, the brads, those, they were brads, right? You could use things like you guys used in school to make the legs so they would bend and the head so it would bend. They could make their own good night farm story.
Good night, dear cow.
I just love that one. You can get more animals. It's just, I will stop there talking. The point being to these different applications is you do not have to be passive about what you're doing with kids just because you got them with a book or an iPad. You can expand on that. I picked out a few of the apps that I know. There are literally hundreds of them. But the main thing you have to do before you use them is you've got to download them and play with them yourself, or find a place that you trust the reviews and read that. Because I've noticed a lot of apps that maybe have good reviews, I'll go in and get them, and then I realized that they were reviewed by people that were going to use them in a way that was different from me. In other words, they were going to use them just to have kids passively sit in front of the iPad and listen to a story. You know, that's okay in its place, and they all love to do that. But every so often I want you to think about, can they maybe make something with this app? Can they create their own story? I had my kids, this is way back when we used a digital camera to do it, but we took pictures of each one of them. And then they dictated a story to me and I typed it. I typed it exactly as they said it. But then I put it up, and that's what we had up during parent-teacher conferences. And we would give them little prompts and questions to see if they could, you know, how they would tell the story. And yeah, it did show up the kids that were maybe developmentally delayed, but you know what? Nobody cares when they're little kids in preschool because they're all changing and growing so fast. That's a blessed age when the kids don't care if they're different from each other. In fact, when they draw themselves, they're often purple, or mom and dad are shorter than they are. Now, my plan for this was the next one I was going to go to, I was going to go through the whole story. Well, since I can't project my iPad, this is an app called Morris Lesmore and the Flying Books, I believe. And I'm going to do a screen capture of it when I get back up there, and I'm going to send the movie some, Dr. Meckenstock can show it. She likes the story. It's for older elementary, I'd say, all the way up through adults. It's a story, and I'm going to show you a little bit about it. This guy, you see him, and he's walking, and I don't know what part of the story this particular video is going to show us, but he sees this woman flying with lots of books. What do you suppose, and think where you are, what do you suppose that woman flying with a lot of books is supposed to symbolize? A librarian. And so he goes through and he walks into this special place and it's full of books, and they talk to him, and at the very end his story becomes one of the books and a new person shows up, a new librarian. But it's a really neat book, especially if you're going for your first time to the library. I have to skip the ad first. Lovely. It's the first one I've had to do that.
We're going to be talking about how we will be doing up.
That book, that app actually started out as what do they call them in the Academy Awards? A movie short, a short animated feature, and it won an Academy Award. And now it's an app, and it's absolutely beautiful when you go in and look at it. It's one of my very favorites, especially when we're talking about children's literature. Next thing I want to show you, I want to tell you a little story though. When I first took that early childhood job, the second job, so I'd been teaching for about 8 years, and I went to the school, and the principal called me. I was going to be starting in June. It was a year-round preschool, and he called me, I don't know, about a month before I started, and he said, your predecessor, the teacher that had been there before me, she didn't like to spend money, and she left a $5,000 surplus in the budget that had to be spent before the next fiscal year. And he said, I think I'm going to get you a computer. I had never touched a computer before, never. And I said, sure, go ahead. Well, he really did a good job of picking out software and this computer, and then about a year later, we got the internet with it. And I was watching my kids. My kids were doing such cool things with it. They had all these questions. There was never just one kid at the computer. There were always at least 2 or 3. And they weren't fighting over it. The other one would be sitting there talking. Well, I had a lot of kids in my classroom with disabilities, because when you teach early childhood, a lot of those kids haven't been identified yet. And so you're really working hard to make them a part of your classroom, even though you know something, they need a little extra help. Well, I had a little girl with autism who would go into the, back then it was a living book series, but similar to some of the book apps that you can get for the iPad. And she would watch them every day, and you can press on the words, and she would do that. Before she turned 4, her mom came to me one day and she said, Mallory's reading. I said, Mallory's never talked. I said, is she? And she goes, yeah. We had Mallory go get a book, and Mallory read the book. Mallory had never spoken to another child in my classroom, but when she started reading those books, she became a hero. She would come up and help me read pages of our stories in the morning. I still follow her. She's on Facebook now. And now she talks and has a boyfriend and everything. But back then, that was a big breakthrough for her. I had another little guy who had Down syndrome. He also hadn't talked. I had him in there from age 3 to age almost 5. And this was when he was about 4 years old. I'd had him for a year where he really hadn't talked. He was really good at nonverbal communication. So he was never left out of anything. He liked to imitate us a lot. And we noticed he was really good at some of the computer apps. One day I looked over and there's these 2 kids that are close to 5 years old on this computer, and they couldn't figure something out. And here goes little Cortland. He's also in high school right now and doing great. And he goes over and he's pointing to that computer, showing them how to play the game. And I was like, yes! So sometimes the computer can be that little nudge that a special needs child needs to be accepted by his peers and to be looked at as, you know what, he was the expert in that case. How often can a kid with Down syndrome in one of our early childhood classes be thought of as the expert? It's pretty powerful. Well, this is, I have 3 grandchildren. My youngest is a little over a month old, but this really hit home. Did you know they use, you might know it already, they use iPads in emergency rooms now for little kids. My grandson had to go in when he was 2, and they had a fireworks app that all the kids had to do was touch it. It distracted him while they did all the painful stuff. Brilliant. So my kids try to donate iPads every couple of years to the hospital because that made such an impact in their life. Okay, this little girl is looking at a magazine. You'll see very soon that to her, it's not just a magazine. There she is with an iPad. Yeah, my finger works. I can poke myself. I love that. But she was 1 year old. Okay, the thing I want to tell you about that though, it's true. If they're very little and they look, but as they get older, they do know the difference, and they're still just as engaged by a book. In fact, sometimes that's their preferred method, is to sit with mom or dad. My grandsons will not let me read them a story on the iPad. That's their own personal time. They'll read the story when they're on the iPad. It's something they can do, but they want me to read from a book. So there's definitely a mixture, and the key to all of it is, you know, moderation. It's definitely not an all or nothing thing. This is about iPhones, but it can also be about iPads. We should think of computers as gateways to human knowledge. In other words, don't think of them as just a device that you can put a program in and give a kid a reward after he's done his homework and he can go over and play a game. That's a use. In fact, that's the reason I went back to graduate school. Because when we first got computers in the late 80s, that's all we used them for. The teachers would bring their kids into the computer lab and they'd sit and they'd play games, and some of you may have had that exact same experience. Did you? Yep. And all I could think about while I was watching that, because I ended up, since I would take apart a computer, they let me be the tech coordinator. Don't tell them you can take apart a computer. You may end up teaching college someday. But, so I would get the money for all these labs, install them, and that's all I saw them used for. And one day it just bugged me enough, and I needed a change in my life, and I quit my teaching job and I went back to school to figure it out. And now I'm still figuring it out because technology has changed so much, and it changes every single year. Judy and I talk about it a lot. Just using iMovie used to be such a simple thing, and now it's just not quite so simple anymore. I wanted to give you my email address. My room is in 115, which is up at the front desk. It's not where the computers are checked out. It's on the other side of the front desk where the librarian sits for research help. If you're working on a project for any class and you're using technology, you can't get it to do what you need to do. Now, I'm not an Excel expert. I'll just put that right out there. But for pretty much anything else, I don't say that I'm an expert in any one software. I say that I have the kind of logic that figures out how to use applications and will help you figure out, it's true, isn't it? But I'll help you figure out how it'll work and how to make it work. We also work with presentations. If you have to give a presentation and you don't want to be the person standing up there with bullet points and tons of words going, they should be gateways to human knowledge. And then somebody asks you a question and you freeze because you really didn't know your stuff, you were just reading it. I can help you with putting together a presentation in any app. I know I've spoken to some classes about Prezi, but I also use Keynote a lot. And then if I have to do like I did today, then I'll export it as a PowerPoint. I like Keynote because I can, move things around and I have a little more freedom, but I've seen people do amazing things with PowerPoint. So this is my email address. This is my office number. My phone number's at the very bottom. I'll turn it off for a minute in case anybody wants to mark it down. And feel free to stop in anytime. I do need someone to send around an attendance sheet. Your professor did send me one, so if you just have a plain piece of paper, how about somebody up front here? One of you, can you do it? And then send it around, and everybody needs to sign in. And don't sign anybody else's names. Looks like everybody's here. You guys were wonderful. I will report pleasantly to your instructor that you were great listeners. If you ever want to stop by and just say, I would like to do something with kids and I'd like to think about an app that I could maybe use, stop by. We'll look together. We'll figure one out. I used to have 400 and some apps on here, but I can't do that anymore. I ran out of space. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks. Here, yeah. I'm going to take a picture of all you guys. You got to look up like you're interested.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay. Now, I probably won't get all of you in it, but I'll take a couple. Thank you very much. Make sure you sign that paper before you leave. I better turn on the light.
And it didn't mean to flash.
Sometimes it doesn't. The new iPads are better at taking low light pictures when we get our new ones. All right. I've got to call CTC and let them know to come and check this. I had to go in, Judy, and bend the little pins in this thing. I was able to get it to hook up to this, but it didn't work. So.
Does Mary use Microsoft?
No, she uses a PC.
Oh, okay, it was.
Yeah, the PC works fine. Normally, I've already made that one, but yesterday I thought, oh, there won't be any problem.